लोग जो प्रैक्टिस किए थे क्वेश्चन,
क्या क्या होता है? आई डिडंट गेट यू।
तो कल क्वेश्चन किए थे हम लोग, एक वो नाम प्रिंट करना था।
अच्छा, क्या असाइनमेंट का बात कर रहे हो?
नो नो सर, कल हम लोग प्रैक्टिस सेशन किए थे ना।
हाँ हाँ।
मेरा इशू आ रहा है इंजेक्ट में।
इशू आ रहा है कुछ?
यस सर।
इश्यूज तुम एक काम करो, तुम पर्सनली इशू या फिर ग्रुप में इशू ड्रॉप करो, ठीक है? तुम्हारा जो इशू आ रहा है उसमें, या फिर देखते हैं अगर क्लास के बाद अगर थोड़ा टाइम बचेगा तो स्क्रीन शेयर करके देख लेंगे, ठीक है? बट पहले आज का जो ट्यूटोरियल है वो खत्म करते हैं, उसके बाद इश्यूज देखेंगे। एंड यूजुअली अगर तुम लोगों को कोई इश्यूज होता है, इफ यू हैव इश्यूज, ड्रॉप इट इन द ग्रुप और डायरेक्टली रीच आउट टू अस, ठीक है? हम लोग टाइम ढूंढ के।
सर वन क्वेश्चन।
यस।
सर ये 5 to 7 जो डाउट सेशन है उसमें कौन रहेंगे सर डाउट क्लियर करने को?
ये एक्चुअली मेरे को पता नहीं 5 to सेशन का डाउट सेशन में क्या क्या क्लियर किया जाता है, बिकॉज
नहीं क्लियर नहीं, वो अभी जो प्रैक्टिस सेशन में जो है वो रहेंगे क्या सर डाउट सेशन क्लियर करने के लिए?
आई एम नॉट श्योर। ये एजुकेटर कौन सा एजुकेटर क्या कौन से मॉड्यूल में है, ये इन्फॉर्मेशन हम लोग को दिया नहीं जाता है। आई जस्ट नो कि मैं कॉन्सेप्ट क्लासेस ले रहा हूँ एंड दूसरा एक बंदा है जो प्रैक्टिस सेशन लेगा, दैट्स इट। लेवल अप सेशन, डाउट सेशन में कौन रहेगा, आई हैव नो इन्फॉर्मेशन ऑन दैट।
नहीं, क्योंकि विकी में डाउट सेशन है डेली 5 to 7।
हाँ लेकिन
तो
ना, नो वन
ओके,
टेक्स।
कल एक बार अटेंड कर देख लेता हूँ।
ठीक है देख लो अटेंड करके कौन है, बिकॉज अगर डाउट सेशन हो रहा है तो यूजुअली इसी ग्रुप में कोई मैसेज ड्रॉप करेगा ना कि वी आर स्टार्टिंग द डाउटिंग सेशन इफ समबडी वांट्स टू क्लियर। ऐसा मैंने कभी देखा नहीं, तो आई डोंट नो कि डाउट सेशन।
सर डाउट सेशन का वो पिंग नहीं करते कोई भी, क्योंकि वो डाउट सेशन सबके लिए होता है, किसी भी बैच का हो।
अच्छा
जो
अच्छा
हाँ, वो एवरीवन उसको कोई भी ज्वाइन कर सकता है,
अच्छा
जिससे
अच्छा।
डाउट हो किसी भी बैच का।
तो आई थिंक वो जो प्रैक्टिस वाला बंदा है वो शायद रहता है वहाँ पे, आई एम नॉट श्योर।
नहीं सर, न्यू कोई अनदर होता है। लास्ट टाइम जब जावा के में थे वो तो डीएसए में भी अखिल शर्मा थे।
अखिल शर्मा, हाँ हाँ हाँ।
हाँ, वो तो स्टूडेंट था।
अच्छा, तो कोई फिक्स नहीं रहता है, चेंज होता है क्या बीच बीच में?
लास्ट टाइम 2 टीचर थे, दूसरा एक और थे, तो इस बार भी चेंज हुआ होगा।
अच्छा अच्छा, पता नहीं मेरे को तो इस बारे में कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन दिया नहीं गया
सर आप या प्रैक्टिस सेशन वाला हो तो डाउट सेशन अटेंड करने का कुछ फायदा है। कोई थर्ड पर्सन रहे हो तो टोटली आई मीन डिफरेंट पाथ हो
I
जाएगा एकदम।
understand, but then the thing is they have this rule like the guy who teaches concept cannot take practice session. Ideally that should be the best case, because if you have any if I'm teaching you some concept, I should be the one to take the practice, but I don't know, in loga kuch alag hi hai. Anyways, these things are getting recorded, so yep, let's not talk about this. You guys can see my screen? Nope.
यस सर।
You can see my screen?
खाली गीकस्टर का वो जी आ रहा है सर।
Correct. Can you see it now?
यस सर।
ठीक है, so let's quickly run through what method references are. Method references are nothing but just special type of lambda expression. ठीक है, that's it. For example, I did not want to take an example for this. Just know this. This much should be enough, right? If I explain like this, or do you want me to actually code in things?
No sir, it's enough.
This enough, right? ठीक है. So basically, suppose you have this thing. Okay, you're creating a list out of this thing. Okay. I told you that there's an utility class arrays from where you dump in array and it gives you a list. Okay. Now, this is basically how we write a lambda function. There is a for each function, which is kind of like a for each loop. On a collection, you can call a for each loop, where this looks very similar to the lambda function we did so far, right? This is where you pass your method's argument, and this is where you implement your single line function. Okay. If you see here, this is basically calling a static method on this string utils class. Okay, this capitalize is a static method of this string utils class. Okay, how do I know it's a static method? Because
we are directly calling it using class name.
Exactly, that's why. So and it, what is it doing? It's just dumping this parameter into this guy. Okay. Instead of writing this thing, lambda is all about making Java short. What they do is they directly call this method like this. This part is what's different. This is a special type of lambda function. Okay, I mean, it's a special type of lambda expression where if you know that there is one parameter, or let's say there are two parameters here, and this function also takes the same two parameters, you can simply just call the function. You don't have to write the number of parameters. How does it help? Okay, so if you have, let's say, 3 or 4 parameters in here, like word 1, word 1, word 2, word 3, word 4. Then if you start writing this word 1, word 2, word 3, word 4 here, then it becomes very long. Okay, Lambda is aimed at making things short. So instead of doing this thing, if you know that there are, let's say there are 3 strings and 1 integer, this function also accepts 3 strings and 1 integer. You don't have to do this thing. You can just directly call this method on this, and that's it, done. This is called the operator, which basically this operator, the specialty about this operator is whatever is here, it will go ahead and dump it in this method. Okay, any question? किसी को समझ में आया बताओ, इसे एक्सप्लेन करते दो फिर से.
Once more.
एक बार सर रिपीट कर देना.
ठीक है, ओके. ये पता चला ये क्या हो रहा है इधर? अंडरस्टूड राइट? ये समझ में आया ना लैम्डा फंक्शन? अगर लैम्डा फंक्शन,
यस सर लैम्डा फंक्शन
ठीक है. इसमें क्या कर रहे हैं ये लोग? इसमें बस वर्ड को यहाँ से ले रहे हैं और यहाँ पे इंजेक्ट कर रहे हैं. ठीक है, और कुछ फनी कुछ हो रहा है यहाँ पे? दूसरा कोई सिंगल लाइन एडेड है? नहीं है. इट्स जस्ट अ सिंगल लाइन थिंग. एक पैरामीटर यहाँ से उठाओ, उसको यहाँ पे डाल दो. ठीक है, तो उस चीज के लिए हम लोग को उसको हम दूसरे तरीके से लिख सकते हैं, जो कि है ये. ठीक है, ये लाइन और ये लाइन में डिफरेंस ये है कि इसमें ये स्पेशल ऑपरेटर डाला जा रहा है. ठीक है, ये स्पेशल ऑपरेटर बेसिकली क्या इंडिकेट करता है कंपाइलर को कि इस मेथड कॉल्स के आगे जितने भी पैरामीटर्स है जो कि है ये, वो सब आप इसमें डंप करो. अगर मैं तुमको एक एग्जांपल दिखाऊं तो बेसिकली ऐसा बोला जा रहा है. ठीक है, तो लेट्स से योर फंक्शन हैज w1 w2. ठीक है, और तुम लिख रहे हो ऐसे स्ट्रिंग यूटिल्स. ठीक है, कैपिटलाइज जो है. ठीक है, उसमें तुम w1 w2 सेंड कर रहे हो. ठीक है, अब इसमें अगर मान लो कल फंक्शन चेंज होकर ऐसा हो जाए w3, तो तुमको यहाँ पे फिर से लिखना पड़ेगा w3. ठीक है, इवेंचुअली इट विल गेट वेरी लॉन्ग राइट. तो बेसिकली ज्यादा कुछ नहीं हो रहा है यहाँ पे जो पैरामीटर है हम लोग बस वही डाल रहे हैं इसमें. कैपिटलाइज को अगर 2 पैरामीटर एक्सेप्ट करते हैं तो हम लोग उसमें, मतलब सॉरी, कैपिटलाइज अगर 3 पैरामीटर्स एक्सेप्ट करते हैं तो हम लोग बस यहाँ से पैरामीटर उठा रहे हैं. ठीक है, एंड हम लोग यहाँ पे उसको डंप कर रहे हैं और कुछ ज्यादा स्पेशल चीज हो नहीं रहा है. तो क्यों ना हम ऐसा लिखे, डन हो गया. ये इंडिकेट करते हैं कि तुम्हारा इस साइड में जो है डेटा वो सब इधर तुम डाल दो. यहाँ तक समझ में आया कि ये चीज क्या करता है बेसिकली? डिफरेंस बिटवीन दिस लाइन एंड दिस लाइन हियर.
You are making it loosely coupled, right?
वो सब लूजली कपल वो सब
also W1 W2 W3 है ना सर?
हाँ,
तो मान लो वो इंडिपेंडेंट बना दे रहे आप डायरेक्टली. कितने भी पैरामीटर्स हो गए वो डायरेक्टली इंजेक्ट कर देगा, समझो. कैपिटलाइज में.
करेक्ट. बेसिकली क्या हो रहा है तुम्हारा ये जो कैपिटलाइज है ना, इट आल्सो हैज टू एक्सेप्ट दीस थिंग. अगर मान लो ऐसा हुआ कि ये पहला स्ट्रिंग ले रहा है, दूसरा भी स्ट्रिंग ले रहा है एंड तीसरा इंटीजर ले रहा है, और ये तुम्हारा स्ट्रिंग है, तो ये एक्सेप्ट नहीं होगा. ये फंक्शन तुम कॉल नहीं कर सकते. उस टाइम पे तुम इसको, यू कैन नॉट यूज दिस थिंग. समझे डिफरेंस? Did you understand this thing?
Yes sir.
ठीक है, ये तभी एक्सेप्ट होगा जब यहाँ पे एक इंटीजर होगा, मान लो i1, तभी तुम्हारा यहाँ पे i1 होगा. ठीक है, दिस इज ऑल मेथड रेफरेंसेस, ज्यादा कुछ फैंसी नहीं है. डन राइट?
Yes sir.
Cool. All right. Somebody was saying to explain again. Is there anyone? नहीं, ठीक है.
ये सर कैपिटलाइज जो है वो मेथड है इसका क्या?
हाँ, ये बस एक एग्जांपल लिया भाई, ज्यादा कुछ नहीं है. एक मान लो, मतलब अच्छा तुमको मैं दिखाई देता हूँ कोड करके. ठीक है, इसको तुम ये सब स्प्रिंगबूट ये सब भूल जाओ. ठीक है, इमेजिन दैट दिस इज अ प्लेन जावा क्लास. ठीक है, मैंने यहाँ पे मेन मेथड लिखा, दिस इज अ प्लेन जावा क्लास. ठीक है, ओके. एंड ये क्या हो रहा है भाई? अच्छा, यहाँ पे ऑलरेडी एक प्लेन है, हटा दो इसको यहाँ से. एक बना ही लेता हूँ मैं क्लास यहाँ पे. ठीक है, मान लो मैं यहाँ पे क्लास बना रहा हूँ जिसका नाम दूंगा sample1. okay, one class called sample1. this will have one method, public static void print something. Okay. Let's say this takes final string arg. Okay. This is one method. What it does, it just prints this thing, prints arg. Okay. Similarly, this has another method which takes a string arg1, sorry, string arg, and let's say another string, okay, str, and this will print it twice. I'll call it print arg, print str. Okay, it's just simple example. Don't break your head over it. Two static methods, and let's say there is one more method that takes. Let's keep it like this. Final integer I. Okay, I'll just say prints I. Okay, simple class. Okay, with three static methods. Let's see how we can use these things. So this is applicable only for functional programming, sorry, functional interface. तो मेरे को इसके लिए एक interface बनाना पड़ेगा. Wait one second. ठीक है. This would be used. This is going to be used only in case of. But अच्छा ठीक है, एक functional बना देते हैं. ठीक है. These are my methods. Okay. Then I'm going to create another interface. Okay. I'll call it sample interface. Okay. This would be void do something. Nah. Do nothing. Okay. And what this will do is this will just take let's just say it'll just take string for now, str1. Okay, so str. Right. This is a functional interface because it has one method, and I'm gonna attach this functional interface method around here. Okay. Now I come here in this and I'll create a main class here. Okay, what I'm trying to basically say is I'll say final sample interface. क्या हो गया भाई? So ये package के बाहर है. हाँ. Sample interface. ठीक है. Now this sample interface has one method, which is that method. It is that method that takes the string. Okay. So what I would do here is I would say str. Okay. And I have this sample1 class. Okay. Let's say I want to do something. So I'll say print something. Okay. Print something. I'll pass this args. Okay. Done. क्या problem हो रहा है भाई? Print something में. अच्छा. Args नहीं, sorry, str. Okay. Did you understand what I did here? Everyone? There is a simple class here. Okay. It's called sample1. Sample1 has these three static methods. Okay. One having this, one having this, one having this. Forget about these two things for now. Focus on this thing. This is a static method. Okay. Static method just takes a string argument and prints it. Okay. This is a sample interface. This is a functional interface which has one method which takes a string and it doesn't do anything. Okay. So I am defining this interface. I'm saying sample interface here. And then instead of saying new.sample interface, we don't do that because we can use Lambda. This is what we're doing. Okay. We're saying that take this, we're just giving the function itself. We're saying take the string and then print this guy. Any questions so far? I hope everyone understands this because we have learned about Lambda. This is it's just taking the string and it's just pushing it to the static method of this sample1 class. Okay, instead of doing this, okay, instead of writing it like this, I can say sample1 colon print something. Okay, any confusion here? I'll actually do this so that you guys understand what I did, how different these two things are. These two things are the same thing. Okay, any question? Is it clear what method reference is?
No, sir.
It's not clear?
Clear.
Yeah.
Someone said it's not clear. Someone said no, sir. What about me? Okay. Basically, this is what it is. Okay. If I change this, let's say I had another interface, okay, which did this. Or it doesn't even have to change the interface itself. You can just go here and let's say you want to call some other method. Okay. Let's say I want to call the second method this. Okay. You cannot, because there is this print something for this. However, you can see here that you cannot call this method here. You cannot do this thing here because by default, this method of sample interface takes only this thing. Okay. Maybe if this is confusing for you, let me change it to 2. Okay. So if I change it to 2, this is permitted. Okay. This thing is permitted, but I cannot do the same thing here. I cannot say print 2. It will fail. Why will it fail? Because this guy is just taking one string. Because I'm implementing this sample interface, it takes only one argument of string type, which is why I cannot call print2 function, because there is a mismatch in the number of arguments. This guy returns one argument, but this guy is expecting 2 arguments. Okay, this would have worked if I had done this str2. Okay, then this would work. Is this clear? Then you can see this is failing because it's saying that I am on, like, this is failing because of this. I can just say string2. Okay, and in that case, when you have multiple parameters, you would wrap it with this thing. Then this is gonna work. And yeah, basically on this function, I can go ahead and say sample1 print something 2. Give me a second. Okay, any questions here, guys? We need to move on to the Spring stuff.
No doubt, sir.
No doubt. Cool. That's good to hear. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. 1, 2. Delete. Okay, guys. Tell me very honestly, how many of you understood dependency injection properly and how many of you didn't? Because if you are not thorough with dependency injection, I will have to teach you this thing again, because this is the single most important concept of SpringBoot. And if you are not thorough with dependency injection, I will teach you again. We'll probably extend one more session. That's fine. But tell me how many of you understood the concept of dependency injection, because it's very, very important. If anyone wants re-explanation, I'll say. Vishwesh was the guy, right, who didn't understand?
Yes, sir. Yeah. It's not like I didn't understand. I just, I joined the session early, but I'm focusing now because I just finished my meeting. I would not like to waste class time, so we'll continue, sir, and we can connect after the class.
Okay, done. No one else has an issue with this, right? Dependency injection concept. Cool. Okay.
No, sir.
Okay, cool. Do you remember this picture? Do you understand what this picture means? Spring Bean life cycle. You guys are familiar with this? I mean, I just taught you this thing day before yesterday. You guys are thorough with this, right? Like, no questions here, right? About how a bean is actually created. You guys are also, I'm going to assume that you guys are also clear with the whole concept of container, which is just a key value pair. If you have no issues in this entire thing, then you have understood what a Spring Bean is, and you have understood the different phases of a Bean life cycle. It's a very important question when you're going for Spring interview. Maybe if you're fresher, they will not ask you Spring interview question, but if you are someone who's working and wants to go for a job change or something, this definitely they'll ask you some. One of the things will be asked, like what is dependency injection, what is inversion of control, or explain the Spring Bean life cycle. It'll be very, and it is recommended that you understand this, because in the real world application, when you start working with lots of APIs of third party, right, there many of the things have to be done before your class is available. Many of the things have to be done before your class is destroyed. So understanding these two specific phases are very, very important. Okay, so I'm assuming nobody has a problem with this entire phase. Okay, and I'll just go ahead with whatever agenda we have today. All right, so I told you that there are basically in a Spring Beans life cycle, there are two phases in which we can hook. One is this phase, which is when the class has its dependencies injected but is not ready to use. That is this init phase. This phase comes when the class is just about to be garbage collected by Java virtual machine. Okay, so for that we saw that we have used this is our sample Java Bean. Here we have seen that in order to hook into the init phase, we created this init method. You could have done it anything. You could have called it ABC. It would have still worked. Okay. This is important because you need to mention this as post construct. And I don't think you can have more than one post construct. Let me just confirm. Oh, you can, but I think the Spring will throw an error. Let me just check. Where was it? March. Must know Java Spring Core. What do we have here? Spring Bean lifecycle. Done. Okay. MVN is the command. How many of you had problems installing MVN?
Me, sir.
Acha, immediately drop me a message in the group. I'll share some tutorial with you. Even after that, if you don't have, I mean, if you're still not able to install, we'll do a personal one-on-one
I
session.
try to install, but when I जब सर इसको import करा देते हैं ना extension को इसकी, तो दूसरे की extension उसकी हट जाती है Java की.
अच्छा, तो बेसिकली मेविन इंस्टॉल करने के बाद ना तुमको वो जावा होम सेट करना पड़ेगा. एंड अगर तुम्हारे
हाँ सर, Java home भी किया था और इसके बाद Maven home भी किया था, दोनों भी. बट जैसे Maven home करते तो Java home हट जाता, Java home करते तो Maven हट जाता.
अच्छा, ठीक है, देख लेंगे. विंडोज में हो ना तुम?
यस सर.
ठीक है, तो एक पर्सनल वन ऑन वन कनेक्शन के लिए तुम बोलो, एक बार बैठ के सेट कर लेंगे, स्क्रीन शेयर करके देख लेंगे क्या पंगा है. ठीक है
सर.
कूल. Okay, so clean install d skip test. Everyone knows what it is. -e basically stands for if there is any error, it will give you the entire stack trace, and then I'll say, and then java -jar target. अच्छा, target अभी बना नहीं है, तो fine, let's just do this. Ooh. It says the goal you specified requires a project to execute, but there is no POM in the directory queue because I am outside of the hello world. Okay, makes sense. Clean install under dskip tests e and then java -jar target hello world app. Done. Yep. Okay. I think you can see that. Correct. So basically, you can have your post construct on multiple methods. All those methods will be called before before Spring initializes your class. Okay, so I was wrong when I said that you can do it only on one thing. You can actually have it on multiple methods. Usually the best practice is that you create your separate methods there and then have one method where you call like have one place where you have all your initializations and then have just one single tag. Okay, but this also works. I'm not sure if this is the case with older versions of Spring, because this might be supported in newer version, but in older version it might fail. Okay, so we'll try to go with this approach where you have just one single this thing. Okay, and then pre-destroy is the phase where you basically do this thing. Now some of you may actually go to companies where you have a legacy system or a older version of Spring. So in most new companies, like in most companies, wherever there is a new Spring project starting, they will always go with these two annotations. Okay, post construct, pre-destroy. But in some companies, if they have some old like Spring version, I'll show you how that is done in that case. Okay, so you have, let's say I'll call it sample Java Bean 2. Okay, don't ask again. Okay, I won't have anything here. I'll just so basically what I want to demonstrate is how I can do these two, how I can have these two methods without using these annotations, because in the Spring initial version, Spring 1.0, they didn't have a concept of annotation. Everything was done on the basis of XML. Okay, so just showing you, just so that you are aware. So we will do something called implements, initializing. You can see this thing, initializing Bean. Okay, there is an interface called initializing Bean, which has one method that you have to implement. So this has something called after properties set, okay, which is same as basically this particular phase, custom init. Okay, similarly, like this, you have something called disposable bean. Okay, disposable bean also has one method, which is destroy. Okay, you can definitely see the similarities. This post construct, what this post construct does is what this after property set does. What this pre-destroy does is what this destroy method does. So in the older versions of Spring, when they did not have support for these two annotations, you could have only one method where you had to set everything.
Hello.
Yes. Abhishek, is
Hello,
it?
sir.
Yes.
Sir, some background noise has been.
Background noise.
Sir,
So 1 second. Do we still have background noise? It's fine, right? Okay, cool. So basically, this is what it is. Just to show you an example here, I'll just say system.out. I'll say starting, and then we'll say ending. Okay. And we shall annotate this thing with component. Because why do we use component? Because that is basically the registration part. Like when you annotate this with component, it becomes a Java bean. I mean, sorry, it becomes a Spring bean. It registers itself. Let's start this again. You can see this thing. There is this starting, which actually came from this. Okay, so whatever this hey there is basically coming from this point here, and this is being printed by post construct. Similarly for this thing, after property set, and where is after property set coming from? It's coming from initializing bean. Okay, where is destroy coming from? Disposable bean. If I just do this, you can see goodbye, but you do not see this ending, right? Do you see ending here? Anyway, you see ending here. So, cool. That's basically it. Let's take a look at today's agenda. What do we have today? Registering a Spring Bean using component or service, registering a Spring Bean using configuration and add bean, injecting Spring Bean using application context, injecting Spring Bean using auto-wired, and field injection versus construction injection versus setter injection. These are the things we will learn. So you already know how to register a Spring Bean using at component. Okay, at service is a child of component. Okay, I'll give you a, so you know the question can be at, I mean, where do we use what? What is service and what is component? Okay, functionally, okay, functionally they do the same thing. They come, if you annotate a class with add component, it will register it will register the class into Spring container. If you annotate a class with add service, it will do the same thing. It will register itself in the Spring container. So why the difference? Why there are these differences? So you should know that Spring actually, in order to make things easy for developers, Spring came up with a hierarchy of components, as in component is the mother and component has few childs. We'll take a look at each of them. Okay, first is the component, which is the very first annotation that Spring gave you to register your bean. Okay, after this, from this thing, they came up with at service, then they came up with at repository. Okay, then they came up with scheduler. Okay, there was something called, no, bean is different, never mind. So there's actually an annotation called bean, which we'll see later, but right now it's different. So in most of the Spring code, you would see these things being done. Okay, these three annotations. So what exactly is the purpose of all of these annotations? Component by definition just registers your bean. It doesn't do anything other than that. Okay, but except for service, these two beans are, they are things, I mean, these are children of component, but they do something more than just registering. Okay, they have additional functionality done, because what was happening was, let's say you want to talk to the database and you want that Spring Bean to be uniquely recognized as a bean which only talks to database. Okay, let me repeat that. If you have 5 classes, okay, and one of them is talking to the database, one of them is talking to, let's say, an API, another one is just running in the background thread. Okay, then even though you have 5 add components, just by looking at the annotation, you cannot tell which one is doing what, right? And many a times you have to do some repetitive task. Like if you are trying to connect to a database, your Spring Bean, let's say you have annotated this class with add component, but then you have to manage the database connection. Okay, that managing part is actually something that happens everywhere. Like if I today create one project 1 and then tomorrow I create project 2, in both the projects I'll have to repeat the same thing. So what the Spring guys decided was, they said, let us create one more annotation which will do what component does, plus it will manage the database connection. Okay, that's when they came up with the idea of add repository. Okay, so you have some database function. So if your class is annotated with add repository, then you don't have to do that extra DB work. That extra DB work is already done by your add repository. If your class is not going to do anything with database, then there is no point annotating that as repository. You can just go ahead and annotate that as component. Okay, similarly for scheduler, if there's a class that you want running in the background, okay, you can do it using component and then implement your own background wala logic. But if you don't want that, you want to rely on Spring's logic, you would do it as this thing, as scheduler. Okay, we'll understand these things as we dive into those modules. Like when you deal with database, you will come across this particular thing. Scheduler, I don't think we have any scheduling topic here, but we can discuss this thing when we have some time. Okay, we are going to work largely with service and component. Okay, service and component, they do the same thing, but why the different naming? So there is a debate about why the different naming is, but ideally it is believed in a typical MVC world, right, where you have a model and a controller and view. One second. like I was saying, so component and services, I mean, they do the same thing, but then there's a reason why this component is there. It is basically to identify something as a service. Okay. What do I mean by this? So in Spring, right, most of your business logic sits in the service. Okay. Your controller is the one, as we'll learn about these things when we dive deeper, but your controller is just for accepting the request, okay, and responding to the client. Your repository is just for talking to the database. It does not allow itself to be concerned with the business logic. So where does the business logic sit? The business logic sits in classes which are services. Okay. And for those classes, you would ideally use something called @service. Okay. This is basically the funda behind it. Let me actually do something like this. Okay. Let me do a case. We'll probably explain a case by case basis. Okay. Let us walk through a task. Let's say that I have a, how do I say this? So when I, let's say I want to build a Spring application, which will do something very, very trivial. It will just, I guess it will run a clock in the background, or it will just generate some random number. Okay. That's all we're going to do. Okay. Spring app to generate random number. Okay. This is what we're going to do. Okay. So you can see that there's no concept of MVC. Nobody's calling this method to generate a random number. Nobody's consuming this. Nobody's sending a response. There's no database connection, nothing whatsoever. This is just a business logic. We just have to generate a random number. So what you would ideally do in a typical Spring world is you would create a package and you will name them as services. Okay. In that services folder, you will create not a Java class, but an interface. Okay. Because in Spring, we always follow this practice, programming to interface. If you are working with something which can have different versions, like if you are working with, let's say, if you have a library and in the future somebody can implement a better library using the same methods, then always go for interface. Okay. So I'll just name this thing as random number generator. Okay. And let's just change the requirement a bit. SpringBoot app that generates random number on start, that generates random boolean on destroy. Okay. This is a requirement that I have. Okay. So let's see how I would do this thing. I would first create a random generator. Okay. Random, let's call it random data generator. Okay. And this is just an interface. It will have two methods. First method is, I don't have to give public. I'll say integer generate random number. That's it. And then I'll say boolean, okay, generate random boolean. You must have noticed that I do not use this. I'm not using this. Okay, these are primitive types. You don't want to use this because if you want to perform some function like boolean, this class, this wrapper class actually comes with a lot of other functionalities. It just doesn't represent a true false. It can actually have, like, it has, like, hang on, I'll tell you. Wrapper classes have additional functionalities that you want to basically use. So you want to work with wrapper classes or your own object as much as possible. If it is something very trivial, then you can have something like this, or in general, the best practice is that you use the wrapper object. Okay. So this is my interface. Nobody can tell whether this is going to be a service or a simple method. No one knows. So what I'll do is within the same services folder, right? I'll expand this for you. Within the same services folder, I will create another package. I'll name it IMPL. Okay. This stands for implementations. All right. So you define all your interfaces outside the implementation folder, and inside the implementation, you actually implement the class. So here, what I'm going to do is I'll say default random data generator. Default, because this is the default one. Like if we don't have other versions, this is the version we're going to use. So I'll say default random data generator. Okay, this is going to be our this is for now, this is just a simple Java class. Okay, it will implement our random data generator. Okay, right? Okay, that's it for now. For now, let's just keep it like this. We'll implement the logic later. But how do I make this thing a service? I can either call it a component, okay? But general practice is, if this is something where your business logic sits, that means it's a service, which means instead of component, you can just use service. It will, these two annotations will do the same thing. Service does not do anything more than component. Component doesn't do anything more than service. They do the same thing, okay? It's just a sugar coating. There's a term, it's called syntactical sugar. It's just that. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so this is how I will build my service. What did I do here? First of all, I did programming to interface. You can see here, this is my interface, and I have basically implemented an interface here. So tomorrow, if somebody comes with a random data generator, which is faster than mine, all they have to do is just create one more class and just implement this interface. That's it. That's all they have to do. Done. Then these are plain simple Java things. It's just methods that you have to annotate. This service class basically registers this particular Java class as a Spring Bean in a Spring container. So now Spring is aware of this. Now, if you choose to give it a name, then you can give it a name within these brackets. With this, you give your name. Okay? If you decide to do it, you can do this. If you don't decide to do it, it will by default take this class name. Okay, that's it. So now what I'll do is I will just have to so this is what it will give me, the random number. Okay, now somebody has to call this thing, which means somebody in this Spring project will have a dependency on this thing. So in this part we have done programming to interface. In the next part, we will actually inject this dependency, inject this class as a dependency of some other Spring Bean. Okay, so let me take the Hello World app as an example. Okay, this is again a Spring component, and you can see here that this is no service. This is not implementing anything, which is why I have marked it as component. Okay, remember this. If you are working with a service, and in most cases services are going to have an interface. Okay, if you are working with interfaces and this thing, and your object, I mean your class is a service, then annotate them with add service. Okay, this is a general practice I have seen. If you annotate this with add component, that is also fine. But if you have a single component, for example, this Hello World app, it's just a single class. Nobody else is going to extend this anymore. No one else is going to do anything with this thing. You can mark it as add component. Add component is the most general type of annotation there is. Okay. So what I will do is, let me remove this. Here I will say that I have a dependency on random data generator. Okay. Random data generator. That's it. Right now is just a variable in this class. There is no dependency injected here. Dependency injection happens when I annotate this with @AutoWire. Okay, that's it. Then what I'll do is I'll basically I told you, like, the task here is generate random number on start, generate random boolean on destroy. Okay, so what I'll do here is I'll create two methods. Okay, I'll say public void on start, where I'll say random data generator dot generate random number, and this I will actually be printing. Okay. Then on, let's say, close. Okay. We'll say random data generator generate random boolean. That's it. Again, these are just simple methods. Spring doesn't know when to call them or if they need to call at the time of application running. I'll say post construct. I'll say redestroy. Okay, that's it. If I wanted to do it the old Java way, I would be doing this thing. I would implement this, saying initializing bean, disposable, implement methods, and simply just call these things. Okay. Okay. How do I know that this is different from that? I'll just add a string here. Like I'll say, okay, that's it. And then for this random boolean, this is just to differentiate the two prints, two logs. Okay, that's it. Right now, if I run the application, you'll see null in both cases because they're not implemented. But yeah, I mean, I don't care about the logic. I just want to show you when something is called. So if you go here, you can see it gave you this null string. This, where is this null coming from? This null is coming from actually this particular method, right? And then this skgfgf null is coming from this particular method, which means after property set and on start, both are getting called. Okay. If I end this thing, you can see this null came and then this thing came. Okay. There is a problem though with this. I don't know which class it's coming from. Like if you have 1,000 logs there, you cannot, like, if just by looking at this thing, I don't know which particular class is coming from. So in a Spring project, system.out.println is no longer going to work because I now need to know which class it's coming from. So for that, we use something called logging. Okay. Spring has different types of logging. The default logger is log4j2. Okay. Now remember, I told you that I have a dependency of Lombok in here in my project. So that Lombok takes care of all the log initialization for you. Okay. It gives you something out of the box, which you can use just with one single thing. I mean, you can do many things actually. You can come here and you can say private, static, final logger. Okay. We'll take the logger from org.slf4j. Okay. And then I'll say logger. I'll say log manager, which comes from, or I think it's logger factory. Logger factory, then dot get logger, and you basically pass your class name. Hello world dot class. Okay, done. Now what you want to do is you want to replace this thing, this entire string system.out by logger. So we'll say logger dot. There are different levels of logging. I'll not go into the discussion right now. For now, just use info. Okay, it is used to print info. There is one thing though in logger, right? You cannot simply pass, like, you cannot simply pass this thing. Okay, you would have to provide a placeholder for this. So the general idea behind this is you use the curly braces. This gives you a placeholder. Do you find any similarities of this one with, let's say, this, where we used to specify that these are the placeholders and then pass your object? Okay. So that's exactly what logger does. Okay. It requires a placeholder, and then with this placeholder, you can just put a comma and everything works fine. Okay. This and this, these two are similar things. Okay. So I'll get rid of this. Right now, if I just run this particular thing, Now you see that the system.out.println, they're still coming without any reference, but this guy, it shows where it's coming from. It's coming from hello world app. So you now know that this particular log is coming from this app, which means that you can now have similar logs in many files, in many classes, but this will tell you exactly which class it's coming from. And you can see the package name. We said in, so in got suppressed to I, G got suppressed to, Geekster got suppressed to G, and then Spring Tutorial got suppressed to S, then this is our package name, and then this is our class name. Okay? That's how it happens. So from now on, we're going to get rid of this thing, our system.out.println, and we'll use just the logger. Okay, you can either initialize your logger like this, or instead of doing that, I'll just leave a comment here. You can either do it like this, or you can just use this annotation slf4j. If you pay attention, it shows you that it's coming from lombok.extern.slf4j. So this is one of the developer friendly uses of Lombok. Okay, Lombok aims towards reducing the boilerplate code. This is a boilerplate code. Okay, with just single annotation, it creates this for you behind the scenes. So now instead of log, you can just type log and you will have the same functionality. Okay, similarly here, I'm going to replace this with log.info. I'll say this. Okay, just paste it here. Okay, basically that's how it is. I'm going to leave these two for you guys to figure out, but that's basically how we're going to use log. Okay, so what did I do here? Let me tell you again. I have a random data generator because my business logic says that on the running of the Spring application, you have to generate a random number, and on the like before the application gets killed, you have to generate a random boolean. Okay, so I first created an interface, then I created a class which implements that interface and basically implements this method. For now, they're both going to return null. And then what I've said is, in order for this guy to register, I could have used component, but I didn't use component because this is a service. Why? Because my business logic sits here. Okay, this is it. This is a service. Then my hello world app is a Spring Bean, but it's not a service. It's just a simple bean. Okay, it's not where my business logic is sitting. So I have annotated this with add component. Okay, and with this, I have said that I have a dependency on random data generator. I haven't written this thing default random generator. The reason why I didn't do it, because tomorrow if someone else comes up with a faster or a better method of random generator, I will have to change things everywhere. So I don't want to do that. In order to basically make it loosely couple, I have used random data generator. Okay, so that if tomorrow some other implementation comes, nothing will change here. I don't have to change anything here. I can just specify what type of bean I want and it will be injected there. We'll see how we do that. But for now, let's just know that you always call the interface and never the actual implementation class. Okay. Even if it's just one method, always try to make sure that there is a interface for your service and then you implement that interface. Okay. This is the best practice that the industry follows. And those of you who are working on Spring project, you will be able to relate to this. So that's it. And basically post construct, this after property set does the same thing as post construct, destroy does the same thing as pre destroy. Okay, let's take a quick 5 minutes break and then we'll come back and finish the rest. Okay, if anyone has any questions, let me know. I'll take the questions now. Okay. Is everyone okay with what I just did here?
Yes,
The
sir.
difference between component and add service. Okay, cool. All right, let me go ahead and check the next agenda, which is registering a Spring. By the way, if you guys are wondering how to implement this thing, just show you private final, sorry, private static final, because I don't need to create this thing every time. So I'll just create a static function here. I mean, static random generator here, or you can just use, instead of static, just use a private final random. It comes from math util random new random. Okay, that's it. And here in this random number generator, just return a random dot get next int. Okay, next int would give you the integer, and in this one you can just say random dot get, sorry, next boolean. That's it, done. Okay, just in case if you're wondering how to implement this thing. All right, this is it. I'll close all the classes. Okay, cool. What's the next thing? The next thing is registering a Spring Bean using configuration and add bean. Okay, so far what we saw was one way of registering. It is a class level registration. Okay, what do I mean by this? In this service class or the Hello World app, in the Hello World app, you have an add component which is sitting on a class. You cannot have like you in this. If I remove this thing, and I want to say that this is my registration component, I cannot say, if I give add component here on this random data generator, it will fail. It will say that this is component cannot be applied to a field, because if you have a class that you want to register as a Spring Bean, there are two ways of doing it. This is one of the ways. Okay, this is the way in which you annotate the entire class with just one method. Okay, I mean, sorry, one annotation. You annotate this entire class with one annotation, either it's component or it's service. Okay, similarly, if you look at this thing, Hello World app application, this is annotated with SpringBoot application. If you click on this SpringBoot application, you will see that so you can go and read about these things if you're interested. But basically, this is the starting point of the SpringBoot application. So these are all class level annotations. Okay, these all apply to class. I think in this here somewhere it is written that it's going to be the class level. What is the target? Element dot type. An element type has type. Okay. Let me tell you something. Okay, so I don't know how much of annotations you know, but basically you can create your custom annotation. But just know that if any annotation, like if you want to find out whether an annotation is applicable on a class or on a method, you can go ahead and check this particular field called target on that annotation. Okay, if the target is set as type, it is going to sit on a class. Okay, if this is as a field, it can sit on any field. AutoWired has a field. Like if you just go here, if you look at this AutoWired, you can see that it actually can sit on. So it can sit on a constructor, it can sit on a method, it can sit on a parameter, it can sit on a field, it can also sit on an annotation type. Okay. If you look at service, which is what we have here, you can see that it can only sit on a type. Okay, so wherever the element type is type, that will be applicable only to a class, and rest of the things are pretty much self-explanatory. You can annotate a method with this, you can annotate a field with this, and all those things. Okay, done. So component is a class level annotation. Okay, sometimes what you might have to do is you want to, like, there is another way of doing the same thing, and I'll show you how that is done. Okay, what is the purpose of it? We will not know the purpose of that particular, like, you know the purpose of this thing, right? But the other way that I'm going to show you, the purpose of this will not be immediately clear, but as we start to work on Spring projects, it will start making sense. Okay, so just for now, bear with me. This is one way of registering a Spring Bean. The other way of registering a Spring Bean is by creating something called configuration. Okay, so I will create a package and I'll name it as configurations. Okay, in here I'll create a class and I'll call it registration configuration. Okay, it can be any name. Okay, but the contract is, or the best practices are that it would always have to have a configuration ending with this. Okay, so registration configuration, what is the purpose of this class? This class's purpose is to be a configuration class. Okay, so I will annotate this thing with add configuration, and if you go and check here, add configuration is actually an alias for component, which means that component is the child. I'm sorry, component is the mother of configuration class. Okay, configuration class not only registers this as a Spring Bean, but it also marks it as something special. Okay, similarly, if we go to services, you can see that it is a component. Okay, its parent is component, and it doesn't do anything funny. Okay, configuration, however, it has other things. It has proxy methods, bean, and all these things. Okay, we'll get into the details of this, but remember how I told you that when your Spring application runs in general, the funda behind the Spring application is it will look for the main class or the main entry point. For us, the main entry point is for us, the main entry point is this guy. Why? Because this guy has this Spring Boot application annotation. Okay, so what Spring does is it scans for other Spring applications or other Spring Beans under the same directory. So if this guy is sitting inside geekster.hello spring tutorial.hello world, right? If this is the parent directory for this particular entry point, it will scan everything there is. That means it will scan this guy for Spring Bean, it will scan this guy for a Spring Bean. And when I say scan, it's basically looking for add component or anything that comes with add component. Okay, so if I set my configurations here, okay, as you already saw, configuration is a child of add component. So this will also be registered by this thing. Okay, so now what is the difference between an add component and add configuration? So here, right, you are just saying that I want this class to be recognized as a Spring Bean. So you are basically putting this as a component, and this entire class becomes how do I say it? This entire class becomes a Spring Bean. Okay, in the configuration class, they are also a Spring Bean, but they say that we are a special type of class which can give birth to other Spring Beans. Okay, let me write it down in words. Okay, configuration classes are special Spring Beans which can give birth to other Spring Beans. Okay, if you see here in add component class, I cannot give birth to a Spring Bean. Okay, like when I annotate this class as a component, this entire class is considered as a single bean. Okay, but this class itself cannot create another bean. Okay, in order, like you cannot have, let's say, another class inside of this on which you can type component. Okay, that will not be recognized. This component part, component annotation will not work because this entire thing is considered as a single bean. Okay, but in Java, I'm sorry, in Spring, there are some classes from which you can create your own bean. Okay, you can register, you can manually register those beans. Okay, let's see how that's done. I'll create one more service. I'll call it printer. Okay, this guy's job will be to just print some random number. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll create an interface and I'll say printer. Okay, this printer will have one function, void print random. Okay, done. This is going to be my service. Okay, what I'll do here is I'll create a simple Java implementation class. I'll say default printer. Okay. And I'll say implement printer. It'll give me this problem here. It'll say that implement the methods. Okay. And this printer, it'll just print a random generator. I want to use log. So I'll go ahead and I'll say slf4j. Okay. So this will basically give me the access to the log file. What I'll do here is I'll say log.info printing random. Okay. Now, where do I get the random from? I can either create private random here, or I can just use the random service that I've used here. Okay. So for that, what I'll do is I'll say private random data generator, random data generator, auto add. Stop me right here if you did not understand what I just did. Or if you want me to explain again. Is there anyone who feels like I should explain this thing again? Just this part?
Yes, sir. Once.
Okay. So this was our task that Spring App will have something that generates a number on start and on destroy. Now my requirement is it says that generates a random number on start and prints a random number. Okay. So I could have, so before I go into this thing, let's just say that now some additional task got added. Okay. It says that on start, you will generate this random number, and at the same time, you will print that generate random number. I mean, you'll print another random number. Okay. Print another random number. Okay. So now my task got added. Okay. For that to happen, I basically created a printer interface because it is a business logic and that should sit in my service. Okay. So even though this has one method, I've just kept it here. So I said print random. Okay. Now this interface has to be implemented by someone. Okay. So who's implementing it? The guy who's implementing is called default printer. Okay. Default printer, basically what it does is that it says print random. Okay. Now its task is to print a random number. Okay. So it can do two things here. It can create its own private final random. It can either do this, okay, and then basically come here and say next integer. It can either do this, or instead of creating another random function, right, it can reuse something that already exists. What is that component that already exists? It is this random data generator. This guy already exists. Somebody already implements this. So I don't have to go ahead and let me close this. I don't have to go ahead and implement my own random logic here, right? Do you agree with this, that we can reuse this thing? Correct. So in order for me to so when I talk about reusing here, that means, see, here I was doing a tight coupling, right? Because I am creating this thing, but I don't have to create it, right? I can just I just have to use it, because look at this guy. This guy says random data generator. So this guy needs to create a random file and then generate a random number for it, because its task is to generate random. So for this guy, it makes sense to have a tight coupling of this random. Okay. But this guy, default printer, what is the task of this guy? Its task is to basically print a random number. Remember how I told you that you give single responsibility to someone. Okay. So random data generator has only single responsibility. It is just going to generate random number. Okay. There is another guy who said that you would have to print that generated random number. I could have written the same method here, but I didn't do it because that's not the task of this guy. The task of this guy is just to generate the random data. It doesn't care about how the data is used. It just generates a random data. Okay. When you're working in the software industry, you always have to think in this pattern. Okay. You want to give as little responsibilities to your classes as possible. Okay. There is a principle called single, I don't know what's it called. It basically says that you have to give only single responsibility. So now that I have a task here that says generates random number and prints another random number, I have because I have been working here, so I know that this guy is an independent function. This guy can be an independent function. But if you are starting with it, you'll probably get confused and you'll probably club these two things together. So what I've done here is I created this random generator and I created a printer function for this. Okay, so this is my printer function, and the printer function can create its own random generation logic, but it doesn't want to do that because there's already someone doing it. So I can just reuse it. Now, when I say I can reuse it, that means I'm stating that, hey, my class has a dependency. Default random generator does not have any dependency, so it will get created just like that. But this guy, printer has a dependency, right? Printer here has a dependency because it wants to reuse something. It wants to reuse a Spring Bean. So it will say private random data generator auto-add. Done. And then what it will do is, instead of doing this, let me just copy this whole thing. Okay, instead of calling this random here, I'll just say random data generator generate random number. Okay, done. This is it. Your one more service is created, and you can now go ahead into this hello world and you can set this thing, let's say, on close. Okay, sorry, requirement is on start. So here you can say this, and at the same time, acha, okay, look at this thing. It says something that generates a random number and something that prints another random number. Okay, so here I already have a dependency on random number generator, but now I see that because I have to print, that printing function is coming from this service, which means this class is now depending on one more class. Okay, so I can say private printer, okay, and I'll just give an auto-add here. Okay, all right. Okay, any questions what I did here? I'll explain again. I created a default printer and I'm printing a random number. Random number is already being generated by someone, so I just reused it. In order for me to reuse, I have to have a dependency injected. This is how I specify my dependency, and this is how this is how I specify the variable, and this is how I inject my dependency with the help of auto-add annotation. Then what is the task here? Task says that this printing has to happen on start. Okay, so I go to my hello world app, okay, and I will basically have to use this printer method here. Okay, so this printer method is at this point just a variable. I would say that I need an injection by specifying this auto-add. When I say this auto-add, it will be automatically injected into my this thing. And then what I can do is I can just say printer dot print random. That's it. That's all I have to do. Okay, now let's run the application and see it fail, and I'll tell you why it failed. Okay, it failed. Why did it fail? Let's read the message here. It says field printer in Geekster Hello World app required a bean. So it's basically saying that this class had a dependency of type printer that could not be found. What does it mean? I already have a printer class here, right? I already have a printer class here, which is being implemented by this class. What is the problem? Can anyone tell me what the problem is? Sorry?
That component is not used.
Exactly. So you did not register this bean. You're just saying that I need this bean, but it's not even registered. Spring cannot find it anywhere, right? Because you have not used add component. So what we'll do is, instead of using add component, we'll see how we can do this thing. So here I am using a particular class, okay, this which is of configuration type. This class can give birth to other beans. Okay, let's see how that is done. So here what I'll do is I'll say public. Okay, this I'll write a method, and this method is going to return you a printer, and it is always going to be the interface type. So I'll say printer. Okay, and I'll just call it printer. Okay, and then here what I'll do is I'll say return new printer, sorry, new default printer. Here if you see, here I am explicitly specifying which printer I need. Okay, that's it. Then this is just a method. Now can I add component on it? It won't work because component is not accepted on methods or fields. Component is only accepted on classes. So in order for this to work, I would have to add a special type of annotation, which is known as bean. Okay. When you do this, okay, what essentially happens is this bean is going to automatically create or give birth to a bean. So up until this point, like when this was not here, it was just a simple Java class. Okay. With this annotation, now this method is giving birth to a Spring Bean. Such classes, okay, such classes are called configuration classes. So classes where you can create bean, okay, like I can have one more this thing here. Let's say I can say public random data generator 2. Okay. I annotate this with bean, and let's say I return a new default random generator. Let's say I have a class called default random generator 2. Okay. This will work. Then this class will basically give birth to another random generator of this implementation. Okay. This and this, they do the same thing. If somebody is confused, stop me right now and I'll explain again. What happened here with add service annotation and what happened here with add the bean annotation, they did the same thing. Only thing is bean annotation can be applied on a method and component has to be applied only on a particular class. Okay. These are the two ways in which you can register your Spring Bean. Okay. That basically completes this part. Now, if your class, if you Mazhar, I think you have some voice issues. Yeah, you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Can you unplug and plug yourself? There's some issue.
Is it audible?
It's audible, but the background noise is there. I think you need to unplug yourself if you're on a mic.
So by using add the bean property, we're able to usually coupling.
I cannot get it, man. Can you just, you still have that background noise? Maybe you can type it out in the chat, or maybe you can unplug your, if you're on a headphone, you can unplug that and plug it again. It's best you chat, like you type it in the chat. Okay. I'll tell later, sir. Okay, done. Cool. Okay. So these are the two ways of creating or registering Spring Beans in a Spring application. Okay. Just remember that if you have a method like this, and let's say you don't give this thing, this will not work. It will fail again. Okay, it failed because it says that the registration configuration class gives birth to a bean, but it is not a configuration type. Okay, so you do this and you're done. Okay, that's basically how we register the different ways of registering a bean. Okay, so let me just take you through the concept of whether dependency injection applies here, whether loose coupling, tight coupling applies here. Let's see. Okay, so my hello world application here said that I have a dependency on these two objects. Okay. So what it did was it basically said that I have a dependency on these two objects. It could have created a printer right here. It could have created a random data generator right here, but it does not need to create it. It just needs to use it. So it says that give me this and give me this. Okay. And also it is not taking a concrete data type. It's just taking the interface. Okay. Which means it is loosely coupled. Why is it loosely coupled? Because if your random data generator has one more implementation, nothing in this class which is consuming the random data generator, or nothing in this class which is consuming the printer will be affected. Nothing in the client. So this class is actually the client and the printer is actually the server. You can think of it like this. Printer is the one which exposes the functionality which is consumed by Hello World app. So your Hello World app is the client. Okay. The client never gets affected, because even if you implement a printer 2 or fast printer, or I don't know, absolute printer or something like that, this won't change. It will still remain the same. This is your loose coupling. And how is it dependency injection? Dependency injection is because you are allowing this auto add. So you're just saying that I don't care how you create this thing. Your client Hello World app is saying, I do not care how you create this class, just give it to me when I need it. And so somebody on the outside, which is Spring container, basically, your Spring container is creating that class and then it is injecting into it. Okay. Similarly, if you look at your default printer is a Spring Bean. If you look at this class, you won't be able to identify whether it's a Spring Bean or not, because there is no add component or add service here. But then if you look at your registration configuration class, right, when your Spring Boot app is about to run, this particular part, okay, where you create a default printer and then you annotate this return type as bean, it does the same thing that this guy does. It registers itself as a Spring Bean. So what then happens is, when your Hello World app says I need someone of type printer, Spring goes and checks, do I have a printer? Yes, I do. So it basically injects it here. Okay. Last time why it failed? Because Spring couldn't find anything called printer in its container. Okay. Even though the class was there, even though the class had a dependency and everything, even though this class had a dependency, it was not recognized as a Spring Bean. So this is the difference between a Java Bean and a Spring Bean. When I keep saying Spring Bean, you need to understand that it is something that Spring recognizes as a bean. Okay. So that's basically it. Without that bean annotation or add component or add service annotation, this is just a simple Java class. That's it. Nothing more than that. Okay. Now in this bean, we are saying that I have a dependency on another object or another Spring Bean. So here I'm again specifying this random data generator and I'm saying AutoWide. Okay. So you can see that there are two classes here, one and basically two. There are two classes here that are using the same thing. Okay. The same printer. So if tomorrow you decide to give a different implementation, then basically all you have to do is just switch the class. Like you have to change the implementation, or you'll have to just create one more implementation and add that as annotation as service. Okay. You don't have to change anything here. Think about this. If I did not have this auto wired here, and let's say I just did this new printer, new default printer, this would have been a huge pain, because if I had 500 such classes, for all of them, I would have to change it there. Okay, I am saved from all of this because I am directly injecting that dependency in here using this. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. I hope I was able to demonstrate why dependency injection is needed in cases like this. Okay, and I hope you understood how to register one more bean using configuration and add bean. Let's just see how we can inject a Spring Bean using application context. Okay, so this is one way where you specify this. Again, why do I need this thing? Mazhar?
It was clear now?
Yeah, voice is clear now. Tell me.
Sir, my doubt is you are when you are using @autowired on printer. So how this gets decided that default printer is been stored as an object?
Acha, good question. Good question. So you're basically saying, how does Spring know that it has to inject this, right? That's your question, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you see any other default printer implementation here?
Say like if I have more than one.
Then there is another annotation which basically specifies what you need. I'll come to that. That's basically what the next tutorial is going to be. Not this session, next session.
Because when you are using @bean, you are clearly mentioning which
which
printer
implementation to exactly
use.
Exactly, which implementation you want to use.
@bean providing.
Correct. So if you're basically saying that, what if I do something like this? I have more than one implementation here, and let's say for now there is something called this default printer 2. Then how does my Hello World app knows which one to inject, right? That's your question, right?
No, sir. My like @bean clearly. Can you go to @bean?
@bean.
Here, when you are using @bean at line number 16, you are clearly mentioning that this printer is going to have default printer implementation class as an object.
Correct.
Because it is clarity, it is having clarity. It's fine. Some one fine day, if I want to, one person has got a new implementation, then I'll have to just replace here at line number 16.
Yeah, you can either do this or you can create something like this.
Yes, sir.
It's up to you. You can just, so this will be a single line change here, which is comparatively lesser than changing it in every class.
Yes, sir.
This is what dependency injection gives you. This is what inversion of control gives you. It gives you smooth, very smooth control. One line change and it will affect everyone.
But at AutoWire, presently, we are not achieving this, right?
Which AutoWire?
At the rate AutoWire, yes. Here printer.
AutoWire is just for finding it. AutoWire is just for retrieving it. Bean is just for registering it. Container has two things. Container, what is a container? Container, think of it. It's just a bucket. You put some balls in it and you pick balls out of it. Okay. So your every ball has a number, right? So you're dumping the ball in the container by using either Bean method or component method, and you're picking up the ball by mentioning AutoWire. Okay, is this clear?
One second. Like now you have used AutoWire, and for our example, we have only one implementation class for our interfaces, right?
Correct.
What if you create two implementation for the same interface and use @AutoWire? What will happen, sir?
Correct. So see, this is what we're going to teach next, but let me just tell you briefly what happens. So you have to give, there are many ways of doing this thing. You can either use something called primary, where you basically say that anytime somebody calls this thing, primarily pick this thing and secondarily pick this. Okay, so if somebody I'll tell you how AutoWire recognizes what it is, but with this primary annotation, every time somebody calls printer, this is more likely to get injected. Okay, this works fine if you have just two implementations. If you have more than one implementation, then what you do is you directly specify a name in the bean. Let's say my bean name is P1, okay, because printer 1, and then you do P2. Okay, let's say that you have two different implementations for this. What's going on? Acha. Same method cannot do the same thing. Okay? So printer 2. So this has a printer 2. I mean, this is P2 and this is P1. Okay. So what you do then is your client app. This is your client app, right? In client app, you have something called qualifier. Okay. In this qualifier annotation, you say, this is the guy I want. I want P2. Okay. Here, you were directly mentioning which implementation you want. Okay, we will come to this thing in the next sessions, but because you asked, in Spring you will have multiple implementations. Okay, either this way or having multiple annotation classes, but basically this is how you inject it. Like when you have multiple implementation of the same thing, you add something called qualifier, and in the qualifier you pass the bean name that you want, and it will give you exactly that same implementation. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Cool. We'll not go into the depth of qualifier now because that's made for a different session. Okay, but yeah, let's just go with this for now. Okay, this is just a simple bean. So this is one way of injecting your dependency. The other way of injecting dependency is you say private application
context.
Application context. Okay, Spring Framework application context. Okay, and basically here what you do is you say final random data generator application context dot get bean, and you basically specify the bean name if you have a bean name. If you don't want to have a bean name, I mean, for now, I'll just give the bean name here as random data. Mazhar, you work on Spring?
No, sir.
Okay, man. Okay.
Dot class over here, sir. Random generator dot class. Yesterday.
Exactly. Yeah. Random generator dot class. Correct. Okay. So this is the old way of doing things. Like usually we don't do this. Okay. What this is basically saying is, you remember the container I was telling you about, that there is this container guy who keeps track of everything, who creates everything. This application context is the container in a Spring Bean. This application context basically has access to all the beans. So it has this get bean method, right? You can literally call this method application and then get bean here. On this get bean method, you can specify the bean name, whatever it is, and then the bean type, okay, which is expected to be a interface type, okay, and you can pretty much retrieve every bean. You can see that the problem with this is like if your class doesn't need to have application context, if your class just needs 2 or 3 dependencies, then I mean it makes no sense here. You can just explicitly specify the dependencies you want, okay. This way this part is going to look cleaner because you have just one guy that is applying everything to you. But ideally, in most Spring projects, you will not see the application context being used that frequently. We directly mention what we want. We will directly say that we need a random number generator, okay, sorry, random data generator, and directly auto wire it and be done with it, okay. So this is one way of doing this. Like I'll just leave it here, private application context auto wired, okay. You can either retrieve it using this, I'll comment it out, or you can use it like this, okay. These are the two ways you can retrieve this thing. So basically this is how we inject a Spring Bean using application context. Injecting a Spring Bean using @AutoWired, we have already seen this thing. We inject it.
Can you go to the starting point of application, that is hello world application?
Hello world application starting
boot जो है ना,
हाँ ये वाला SpringBoot
Spring application dot run will return application context, right?
Correct. No, it's no. This won't run application context. SpringBoot application.run is going to first take this class. Okay, it will then basically look for this guy. As soon as it finds this guy, it will create behind the scene. It will create this container class, which means that it will create that application context class, and it will start registering, or it will start looking for every class with either bean or add component or add service, and then it will start registering. It will start creating them and putting them inside the application context. Does it make sense?
But sir, if we write at line number 19 application context, can you just write application
here application context?
Yes sir. No, before Spring application, yes.
Acha, you want this as a dependency?
No sir, just write at line number 21. Just create application context. Equal to, just write equal to the, okay sir.
Then
now
what is the application context? You have to then implement.
Directly it will return, na?
Direct, what will return, man? You have to insert these things manually, man. You see these methods?
No sir, yesterday what happened in practice session, what we were doing is we are directly achieving application context without
acha, something like this where you pass the XML and shit.
नहीं, वो कुछ भी पास नहीं किए थे सर, डायरेक्टली स्प्रिंग एप्लीकेशन डॉट रन जो है ना वो रिटर्न कर रहा था एप्लीकेशन कॉन्टेक्स्ट. ये देखो सर.
ओके, ये एप्लीकेशन कॉन्टेक्स्ट रिटर्न कर रहा था.
यस सर.
ये तो कुछ रिटर्न ही नहीं करता. अच्छा हाँ, कॉन्फ़िगर करेक्ट. हाँ राइट. अच्छा यस. सो यू कैन बेसिकली डू इट हियर, एप्लीकेशन कॉन्टेक्स्ट, ऐप कॉन्टेक्स्ट. या, this you can do. This will give you the application context if you need to use it inside this method. Okay, mind it, why is it that they have written it like this? Because you cannot, like, if you use this application context here, right, this needs to be created because this is not a static method, right? So if you want to create this thing and at the same time you want to have the application context readily available to you, it will basically return that to you. Okay, did it make sense or did it confuse you?
Yes sir.
Clear, right? So usually you would not care about this because what are you going to do with this application context here? You're not doing anything at this point. It's just a starting point. In most Spring projects, you will see that this class is untouched. No one does anything, like no one even does this. Okay, then if you don't, so if you take your application context here, you will then have to take the responsibility of passing it to every component that needs it, right? We don't need to do this thing. It returns an application context, but we won't use it. Whoever needs it can directly inject itself like this application context. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. This is done. Okay. Now we'll see the 3 different types of injection. Whatever I was doing so far was called a field injection. We'll now see constructor injection and we'll see setter injection. Okay. Let me create. Okay, so These are examples of injecting as field. Okay, why are they fields? Because if this is a Java class and these are the fields of the Java class, you are injecting on the fields of it. There are two other ways in which injection can happen. One is through constructor and one is through setter method. Okay, so let me go ahead and create a few more. Let's call an interface. I'll call it constructor service. Okay, constructor service, and this will have some method like void do nothing, because I just want to show how the injection is done. That's it. I'll go ahead and implement it here. Right, I'll say default constructor service implements constructor service. Okay, let me do this. I'll annotate this as just service because this is service class. Okay, now let's say I just want to print a random boolean on it. So I'll say so far I was doing was random data generator here, random data generator here, right? Instead of doing this, what I'll do is I'll keep this as private random data generator. And earlier I was doing this as at auto-wired annotation. I won't do it. What I'll do here is I'll say public default default constructor service final random generator this dot random generator equals to random data generator. Okay, done. Then here you would have to do this auto-wired annotation. It does the same thing as this. Whatever you see here, it does the same thing here as well. Just the difference is that you're not having an @word annotation here. So if you look at a class and you do not find the @word annotation there, do not panic, because maybe in the constructor somewhere this is written. Okay, that's all it's doing. And I can verify this by saying log. Okay, I have to annotate this with SLF4J. By the way, if you guys are going to work for a company, don't use SLF4J library, because there was a huge breach in SLF4J library. Whichever team you work with, just ask them what type of library they use, and that should be good enough for you. Okay. There was a data breach on this. Okay. Random data generator dot next generate random boolean. That's it, done. Anyone who calls this method will basically get this thing. This is how we do a constructor injection. You can see that this actually we can make this thing final, because nobody is going to re-inject this thing again. Okay, this is one of the ways of injecting dependencies into it. The other way is basically to setter injection or method level injection. So I'll just call it method service. Okay, interface. This also will have a do nothing method. And in the implementation, I'll say default method service. Okay, method service. Okay. Okay, done. Add service. Okay, and here what I'm going to do is I'll basically say private void set method. Okay, I'll take the same thing. I'll take printer this time. Take a printer. This dot printer. I don't have a printer object, so I'll go ahead and create this. It's a private printer. That's it, done. These are the three different ways of injecting: field injection, constructor injection, okay, and method injection. In my experience, I have very rarely seen this method injection, because this is a very unstable, unreliable way of doing things, because somebody can quickly change this, like call this method and change it to some null value, and the whole application will fail. Okay, never use this. If in the interview somebody asks what's the difference between these three of them, just tell them that there's functionality wise and performance wise, there's not a single difference in any of them. Just that if you're doing a field injection, by the time your class is ready, you can use it. However, if you're doing some injection in the constructor class, okay, you have those things ready. So if you had a field injection here, right, you won't be able to use that. I mean, basically field injected stuff is not available to constructor, because constructor is what gets created first and then field injections happen. So in that way, the most secured way of injecting would be through constructors. Okay, the next would be field injections. Setters would probably be the most unreliable, because somebody can call this method and can set it to null, which will set this whole thing to null. So even if at the beginning of your application Spring set this to, let's say, the printer, if some class in your application sets this to null, it's gone. Okay, so
sir, but it is private, right? In this method is private.
I wrote this as private, man. If this is public, it will do the same thing.
Definitely it will be null. You can.
So somebody can inject a null value. Spring won't complain this to you though. Spring won't complain anything about it. This is very unreliable, because somebody can inject a null value, and then whichever methods are calling this printer, they're going to fail. They're going to throw a null pointer exception. Don't use this. If you want the safest way of injection, use the constructor, because constructor is the first thing that gets created. Field injection, if you do, then make sure you never call it inside the constructor, because when the constructor is getting created, the field values are not even available. Okay, and then the method service. These are the three modes of injections. Let me know if you guys have any questions. If not, we can close the session. Does anyone want me to explain anything? All right, cool. Before you guys leave, I just wanted to show you something. Every day we do the classes. Sorry, no, that's not what we got. I've pinged in the group. They will probably give you this particular link there. Okay, download this code and start like going through the code, or start running your own applications. Okay, because now whatever assignments you'll get, they will be completely Spring based assignments. Okay, so do that, and I will basically add the classes. This is my commit message. So when you're going through it, you know. And just be careful. We're not using master anymore. We're using basically main. Okay. Cool, guys. That's it. Thank you for joining.